The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we will review the Houston Dynamo and Violet AC matches. We'll also preview this weekend's match against Colorado, and we'll cover a few other pieces of Austin FC news. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I will be at Hop Squad Brewing Company on March 26th, Sunday afternoon, for a special event. I'm at Hop Squad Brewing Company a lot, so that's not that part of it's probably not like a real revelation. But let's quickly talk about this. So there's going to be a laundry project donation collection, and this laundry project is a passion of the Stuvers, and something that's been going on for I think all 3 years that they've been here in town. So this is sort of the big wrap up of it this spring. So both Brad Stuver and Copatejas will be at Hop Squad on Sunday, March 26th from 1 to 3, and they will be collecting items needed for laundry, which includes scented and unscented laundry pads, fabric softener, stain remover, bleach laundry bags, all the laundry stuff, along with cash. So hopefully folks will make it out there, and we are going to contribute a little bit, I believe, to this too.
Yeah, so if you would like to give any of those items, you can show up on March 26th and take some of those things to Hop Squad. Another way you can help is we're going to be counting all of the reviews that we receive until the end of March. For every review that we get, we're going to donate $5 to the laundry project. And so if you want to give directly to it, by all means do that. But if you want to find an additional way to help, an extra way to get us to give a little bit of more money, wherever you find your podcast, go on there, leave us a rating, write it out. If you've already given us one, do it again, and it'll just like update it and put it at the top of the queue. That helps us as well. And so, you'll help us out, help out the laundry project, and help the Stuvers, help out our community like they are always doing.
Yeah, we say this a lot, but we're very fortunate to have the Stuvers in this community and have like jumped in because they're just wonderful people who like always have their eyes on doing the right thing. And helping people out. So this has been really exciting. And if you haven't had the chance to get a picture with Copatejas, this is another good opportunity too, because I know it hasn't been out in public a lot.
I don't know if this is public knowledge, but it was at my birthday party last year.
Oh, nice. I did not know that.
I don't know if I should say that out loud or not. So I'm not going to say how it got there or why it was there, but it was there.
But it was there.
All right, let's jump into Austin FC news, Jeremiah.
Yeah, let's do it. This is the week of international call-ups because this is about to be the week of the international break. So Austin FC has three players in some way associated with some type of international call-ups. I think the first one, and maybe the most important one, is Leo Väisänen, who is going to be called up to the Finnish national team for the
Euro qualifiers.
Qualifying. Yeah, the Euro qualifying. Not surprising since he's made 23 appearances for the Finnish men's national team in the past. Cool that he's making it up. He is probably already in Europe and will not be back until after their match on March 26th. So he will not be available this weekend against Colorado for Austin FC. I mean, good for him. So this is like our first real full international call-up, correct?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's just been youth so far.
And speaking of youth, we also have Owen Wolff, another pretty regular starter, called up to the U.S. youth national team. They're going to be in training in Europe too and play international friendlies against England, France, and Serbia and Spain. So he is also probably in Europe right now and will not be back until after the Colorado match. Those are two big holes in the roster probably for this match, and we'll talk about that during the preview. And then our third call up, and since you get the best, you did the best job of like figuring this out. And this is also another repeat international appearance, but a little bit different because this is an Austin FC2 guy. Bobosi Bayaranga? Is that how you would go with it?
I guessed Biarawanga. I don't know if that's right or not either, but but yeah, he got called into the Ugandan national team. This is for AFCON qualifiers. So meaningful games for all three of these guys. Going back to Owen, this is the last camp before the U20 World Cup. And so the fact that he's in this roster means he has a real shot of making the team for that U20 World Cup in May. Really cool to have all three of these guys getting called in. But for Austin FC's depth, it's a little bit concerning because we already have been like Leo Weisen has been the only center back on the game day roster, not only the starting 11, but in the game day roster, he's been the only one. Owen Wolff has been by far the best partner alongside Danny Pereira so far. And so a little bit concerning. We'll get into that in our match preview, but nonetheless, very cool to see these guys going abroad and representing Austin FC.
Well, and it takes one thing away from the Austin FC haters, because I remember I think it was at some point last year, there was an international break and Austin was the only MLS team with that international player.
Yeah.
And so it's good to see Austin having, I don't know, 1 to 3, depending upon how you're counting it. But yeah, it's going to make for a little bit of a challenging match. And I don't know, why does Major League Soccer not align with the international? Like, why do we not take breaks during the international break?
I think just because of when our season is, it's hard to take enough breaks. I think traditionally they almost didn't stop at all because there just weren't that many players getting called in. And so it wasn't worth it for the 3 guys getting called out to stop the whole league. They have gotten better about taking more breaks. Luckily, Austin has a bye week right after these guys are coming back. And so we're not going to have to play them on short rest. They'll actually have a good week and a half to catch back up. So that is helpful given our depth situation right now. But yeah, there are going to be quite a few MLS players missing over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and like you said, and 2 very important players to Austin FC. And one of the other pieces of news we got was the ATXFC2 schedule and the ticket prices. So the tickets are $12 a match, including fees. How does that hit you? Is that about what you're expecting, more or less? What do you think?
I was afraid it was going to be higher. And so I think that seems okay. Like, depending on what the team looks like and what the atmosphere is like, maybe that starts to feel a little high. But I was honestly afraid it's going to be higher than that.
Yeah, that was the same. I was like, that seems fair, and I was stressed it was going to be a lot more. And so for those of you that are interested, the first match, which is at Palmer Field, which I think was also announced during the schedule, right? Did we know
Correct.
for sure they're going to be playing at home at Palmer? So we're playing at home at Palmer Field, and that is the first match is Friday night against the Dynamo 2, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
At 7, be $12 including fees. I think some of the supporters groups are planning to do a little tailgate, maybe a march or something, since it's the first match. Will we learn something about this? Is probably our first chance to learn something about Saturday and Saturday's roster.
Yeah,
with this match. So like talk about that, and maybe this seems like something you'd be very excited about and like digging into.
Yeah, we'll start to get little like secret looks into what Saturday's match day roster is going to be, because in general, I'd imagine a lot of the guys getting left off of the Saturday first team game day rosters will be playing with this team. And so since the 2 team plays first, if we see Kip Keller starting for ATX2, then okay, he's probably not going to be with the team tomorrow and someone else is going to be. Or the same with, I guess it's like there are like less obvious options, but like last season would have been like, okay, Musa Jite is playing with ATX2, then that means that he's not going to be on the roster for Saturday. So yeah, we'll kind of get a little preview of the Saturday games, but then this is going to be just kind of like an exciting next step in the whole Austin FC pyramid being built out, and kind of having not only these guys playing down and getting minutes, but seeing academy kids play up and see how they do against grown men in a professional environment. So yeah, the quality is a thing that we'll see. Like, by all accounts, MLS Next Pro has not been great, but it'll still be an exciting thing as like a hardcore Austin FC fan to go out and kind of see this next piece of the puzzle being created.
And so are you going to go on Friday then?
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm hoping to be there.
Well, have a good time. I'll be at the rodeo again, but this time I'll be seeing a country music artist and not Flo Rida playing.
What artist?
Playing at the rodeo on Friday. Lainey Wilson. My wife's a huge fan, and so therefore, that makes me a huge fan. That's what really matters, I think. And then I think it will be more telling when Austin has a full roster, right? Like if Owen Wolff and Leo Weisen were in and available, then like you might see a guy like Valencia maybe play for Austin FC2, which you're
maybe
which you're probably not going to see with this match, right? It's like the roster is thin enough that almost anybody who's senior quality is going to be on it. And I sent you this tweet today about a guy. I don't know if this is interesting to you or not, but it was because we had talked about sort of the quality of USL versus the quality of MLS Next Pro, and so we got a piece of news today that U.S. Youth International Nathan Worth, like, who plays the New York Red Bulls Academy, is signing with USL instead of signing a homegrown contract, which is something we've talked about as a possibility with Micah Burton, with the idea being that he's 16 and he's going to play in the USL for 2 years and try to go to Europe. So I think that was a little bit telling on sort of the quality of play around MLS Next Pro, and maybe why somebody might not necessarily take that like academy Next Pro first team approach, and where USL may still have a place to play and sort of like super talented young players.
Yeah, and there's a kid named Jonathan Gomez who was in Dallas's development team, North Texas, and they were kind of in the exact same situation. I think he was 16, 17, and they wanted to keep him around longer term in the Dallas setup, but couldn't promise him first team minutes. And so he said bye and went to Louisville City, played for them for like a year, and now he's playing for Real Sociedad's B team as a 19-year-old and getting like quite a few appearances for them. So it's not like he went off and is playing for Barcelona or Bayern Munich or whatever, but like us top flight Spanish team's B team as a 19-year-old is like not bad, really. So I think it's a thing that MLS needs to be careful with. And like these roster rules, all these restrictions on how much you can pay people and who you can pay, it could end up biting him in the butt occasionally with situations like this, where like Dallas isn't going to waste a roster spot or cap space on this kid. And so they end up losing him. And that as the pipeline gets fuller and fuller, that it could become a more common issue.
Yeah. They become a bigger risk. Okay. Do we want to talk about this weekend matches now?
I guess we have to, Jeremiah.
Do we have to talk about this weekend matches now? Okay, let's do it. Let's start with Tuesday night. Let's start with AC Violette. And this is a note I wrote in as the headline, like, so CONCACAFed. I think if you that was by far the number one takeaway for me from this match. It's like everything that you've ever read or heard or seen about time wasting and beyond. And credit. I think Eric Goodman took a lot of criticism for this tweeting about how, like, if you have a problem with the way Violette played, like, you have a way with the current setup of this game in soccer, and like you don't have a problem individually with Violette, because like we see this all the time with clubs that are underdog clubs that are in the situation they're in, where you're just gonna take every single advantage you can take out of the situation, and as long as you're not punished for it, like, it's stupid not to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I disagree that that the game should be that way, but it is the way that it is. And Violette was confident that they could get away with it. And so why not? Yeah, do what you can to win. And they did it.
Yeah, and I was like 30 minutes in, I was like, these guys haven't started flopping and laying around all over the place yet. And as the game went on, like, they did, but I was a little bit surprised they didn't even do it from the opening whistle. So yeah, there was that. I've never seen two stretchers out on the field at the same time, I don't think, especially when neither one of them ends up getting used. And the backup stretcher is pretty janky looking. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but I don't know if they could actually carry a person. But maybe let's what are your, other than all of that, and maybe we can get into that too, like, what are your sort of highlights from the game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like a lot of people were frustrated with things that happened in this game in itself, which is, I think, like, with the emotions going into it is fair, but nothing that happens in this game matters as much as it does if the first game doesn't happen the way that it does. And I think that like gets lost a little bit. I think people are in their emotions about like how this one went and got maybe a little too angry at certain players or coaches for certain things, when really, like, if you're going to be angry about anything, it should be the performance in that first game, because that's what led to this.
Yeah, I think I told somebody, like, we were an Amro Tariq banger of an own goal away from this one going into penalty kicks, because that was completely unnecessary for Austin to be in that situation. And everybody performed in this situation exactly like you would expect them to. And so, like, Violette poop housed as much as they could. They sat way back, but it was totally a function of what happened last week.
Yeah. So Austin ended up putting I don't. Do you know how many crosses it was? I don't have the stats in front of me here.
It was between 68 and 70, but a lot.
Okay, and then
Violette had 4 crosses, by the way.
And then Austin had 35 shots. I think 24, 25 of those were inside the box. They had, I think, at least 2 goals called back on VAR reviews. They had a penalty not given on a VAR review. And so there's several little moments where it like could have still swung the other way and just didn't, either by bad luck, I think on at least one of them, a bad refereeing decision, or just not finishing. But they had so many chances that like I have a hard time being too angry about any of the individual refereeing decisions, mainly that the no penalty call on Jussi Zardes, because I think that's a clear pin. And it also should not have taken 6 minutes to figure that out.
Right, which really wasted time at the end of the game. And that was about 2 minutes before that. My son's language had gotten rather salty just because he was sort of, and I'd like talk to him about like not swearing so much, and then that penalty didn't happen, and then I just unloaded every word that I'd ever heard, and like I had to kind of eat crow on like my lack of credibility for it. But they, like you said, Austin put itself in the situation to allow those things to happen too.
Do we want to talk about like tactics or decision making in this game? Or is there any particular notes that you wanted to touch on?
I mean, I guess this just for generally for folks who may listen, like obviously that was an absurd number of crosses. Violette had everybody behind the ball. You know, they were really like low block or like bunkered down. Like what, if you were Josh Wolff, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think the crosses is the main thing I've seen people frustrated with. Whenever a team is just going to sit in the box and they have no interest in scoring, right? Like, and so there's no reality where you're actually going to draw them out enough to be able to like get in behind them. Crossing is the way to do it. That being said, crossing in the right moments and execution has something to do with it as well. So I think there's maybe some like decision-making moments where like, okay, maybe this isn't the time to do it. It's often the way Austin plays, and this is pretty typical of like positional play setups, but you'll either switch the point of attack, like playing it across the top of the box or across the other side of the field, or as the ball goes like wide and then gets played back to like a higher position, as the defense is like readjusting, that's when you want to play it. I think sometimes the cross didn't get off fast enough, or oftentimes the cross just wasn't accurate and wasn't going to a good spot on the field. If the crossing had been a bit more accurate, and I think like John Kolmanich is a guy who's usually quite good at that. I thought overall his crossing was kind of poor. Like he was just not finding the right spots. And so execution has a lot to do with it. There's a few moments where the ball did find people in the box and we just couldn't finish it, couldn't get our foot on it. And so, it was a lot of things combined that led to it. And just like in a normal game, we won the game 2-0. And so in a normal game, you'd come away with that being like disappointed that you didn't score 4 or 5 goals. But okay, we still won 2-0. But this wasn't a normal game. We needed to score 3 or 4. And so it just like adds that urgency and that intensity even more. I think my one complaint, as far as another complaint based on that crossing, is especially towards the end of the game, they just had everybody back there, and like Adam Lundqvist and was it maybe Nick Lima? I can't remember who was on the other side, but kind of those tucked in spaces that we saw the fullbacks play in a lot last year. Kind of like that inside channel a little bit deeper, and as the ball would get played across, they would play across in. And that's a pretty good area to take across from. But there would be one guy kind of like standing in between Lundqvist and Fagundes. And it like Lundqvist never really even acted like he wanted to like find Fagundes back there, which you'd think that would be maybe plan A, is to try to slip Fagundes in behind right there. And then he could like maybe cut it back to the top of the box, which is another really good way to score against a defense like this. And it just like didn't seem interested in it. It seemed like the cross was the first choice. And so I think that is a criticism I have of all the crosses. But again, like just the sheer number of them, like that's gonna happen in a game like this, and maybe some better decision making, some more guidance from the coaching staff, but there was always going to be a lot of them.
Yeah, this is probably a small thing in the context of the entire game. The other thing I read a lot of questions about was bringing in Will Bruin for John Gallagher at 80 when you get another striker, and not bringing in Maxi Urruti, which I think a lot of people wanted to see, because a lot of people are down on Jesse Zardes, which we'll get into this, I believe, a bit more when we talk about the Dynamo match, like what Maxi does or doesn't bring to the team. I've never seen you so sure. I've never seen you so sure that you're going to make a point later on than right now. But
no,
let's cover it at a Violette, and then we could probably just like wrap this up and walk away from it. Maybe talk about what it means in the long term, and then go into Houston. But talk about that.
So the Bruin thing, real quick. I get it. Like Maxi's kind of the hot hand. He's been doing well at the ends of games, but we're in a situation where we're playing a lot of crosses in. And so I could see like, okay, put the big guy in who can score with his head, which Maxi just like doesn't score with his head. That's a known fact that he just doesn't do it. And so I can understand either situation. Wolff went with one and the guy didn't score. I didn't think Bruin was bad, but I totally understand why people could have wanted to see like, no, Maxi's been doing well, put him in. As far as the whole thing, like as far as looking at the depth of this team, how many competitions we're going to have this season, already being down to almost no real center backs in the match day squads. I think it's probably a good thing that we're not going to be playing in all these competitions the whole way through, but this is not the way that I wanted to come out of this one.
I think that is absolutely very fair. And this is going to, I think I tweeted this, but it's really bad for my over-under predictions for the number of games for this season that Austin didn't get two more out of this one. But yeah, so Austin took a lot of grief from, the usual suspects. Obviously, Dallas and Houston fans, people from Columbus, more than happy to pile on and call Austin embarrassment to the league. And, I don't know if that was the case. Like, I've not studied a lot of past CONCACAF Champions League results, but I feel like stuff like this happens from time to time to any team at any level.
I think this is like maybe a bit further down the spectrum of them, but there are lots of examples that are not so far off. Like, this is just a thing that happens in CONCACAF. You go away to a location that you're not comfortable with, the settings you're not comfortable with, playing with guys who haven't gotten to play together a lot on a poor surface. Like, there's a reason people use CONCACAF as a verb, and
Yes.
Austin found out the hard way. Like, it's a learning moment for the team. I hope they can learn from it and grow from it, but it's a thing that happens. And so, like, it's still embarrassing. I think it is embarrassing. I think the players should be embarrassed about it, but in the grand scheme of things, it is not like the most outlandish thing to say that a Haitian team knocked out an MLS team in this competition, because it happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, you can't be embarrassed about it, but you have to do better. Like, there's no point in dwelling, especially with the number of games that Austin has in short order up to this Houston match and then the Colorado one coming up. Like, you didn't want to turn that into something else by like dwelling on it. And I think some people were kind of grumpy with Josh Wolff for being like, all right, we lost this and now it's time to move on and put this in the past. But that's honestly the only attitude you could take about it.
Yeah.
So let's get into the Houston game week and the Houston match, but you want to take a break before we do that?
Yeah, let's take a quick break. We'll come right back with that Houston review, and then we'll also preview the upcoming match against the Colorado Rapids. Hang tight. We'll be right back with more Moon Tower Soccer.
When no one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And I want to ask you, because you told me this, you heard this copy, but not from us, and that threw you off a little bit, right?
I did. I heard it on KUTX listening to the radio the other day, and it was a woman reading it, and then the ad copy was like slightly different from what we read, and it was very bizarre to know every word she was going to say next, and then her not say the word I thought she was going to say next at times. So it's really messing with my head.
Well, hey, I love to see them there. We at Texas Mutual are long-term supporters of KUTX2, so it's good to see us all in the same place. So you can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of personal injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Moon Tower Soccer is also brought to you by Covert Auto Group. Covert Auto Group has been meeting the needs of local car buyers for 114 years because of their service, financial expertise, and support after the sale.
In addition to supporting car buyers, Covert's an important part of the soccer community. If you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, be sure to check out covertauto.com.
Moon Tower Soccer is also brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty, and we are excited to announce that we will again be giving away 2 tickets to this week's match. So fill out the form in the show notes and enter for your chance to win.
Again, this is made possible by Sage Wilson Realty, so if you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. You can find them at sagewilson.com.
All right, we're back to talk about the second disappointing performance this week, but I wanted to start with some of the moments leading up to the week, and that is, Landon, you and Andrew Wiebe got into it a little bit on Twitter, talking about a very valid position you had about how you cannot be an expert on every single team in the league. So maybe expand on that a little bit.
So this started with Kevin Morris subtweeting Matt Doyle and talking about how it's pretty clear that it doesn't always seem like they've watched every game or know exactly what's going on with every team. I then retweeted that and said, like, here's some more evidence to the fact that these guys don't watch every game, but continue to act like they're experts on these teams. Andrew Wiebe, not tagged on any of these. Nobody from Extra Time is tagged on any of these. And he found it and commented on it and said that it was a hell of a claim, which fair enough, but
it's a hell of a claim, but probably accurate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at this and say it's sour grapes because, like, Austin's not doing well and we're mad that they don't rate the team. It's like, if you don't rate the team, that's fine, but like, have valid reasons for it. Do your homework essentially. And it just every time that like Matt Doyle's article comes out with the weekend, he didn't actually write the one this week. It was Tom Bogert, and even in that one, I was like, the thing you said about this team, I don't think is actually right. But essentially, yeah, I think they have a really hard job. It's impossible to be an expert on all 29 teams in the league this big. But don't act like you're an expert then. Like, be humble and like I know a lot about Austin FC, but I'm not going to pretend to know everything about another team. And so I think that's the part that annoys me with it. And like, I'll say it again. If Matt Doyle says something that I think is completely wrong, I'll call him out again. If Andrew Wiebe wants to come at me again, then that's fine. I to be clear, I respect Andrew Wiebe and actually really like him. And I appreciate him like getting into the trenches and having these conversations, but I think he's wrong in this case.
All right. Well, let's talk about the match itself. So I was in Houston. I did not expect to go to the match, but as it turned out, we ended up there because you know what? The prices were right. I ran into, so my hotel, I rented it. So there was us and 2 other groups of Austin fans that just happened to be in Houston. And I knew that because they were wearing their Austin FC stuff because it was kind of cold. And I'm like, I mean, it's $28. Then you can buy tickets on the day of the game. Like, I feel like I'm cheating like the club if I don't go. So a bunch of us ended up there. I think there were probably, I don't know how many people ended up on the bus, but there were a bunch of people that just bought tickets and kind of ended up over in that section. So there were over 500 people in the stands in the Austin side. There were drums, there were trumpets, there were horns. Like, I don't know what it sounded like on TV. I think you had a little watch party there, but like it sounded super loud.
You mostly heard
the stadium,
the Austin fans. Whenever the Dynamo band was also playing, they might have been a touch louder, but for big stretches of the game, you were hearing the Austin songs and chants.
Yeah, so it was a great environment, and credit to Houston. I mean, it was the biggest crowd of the 3 that we've seen by far. I mean, it was their home opener, and I think they had maybe 19,000. So it was a pretty respectable showing for Saturday night there, which made for a good environment. And I wish the game had been a little more fun from the Austin perspective. because like it would have been great to get out of there with a win and kind of like keep chanting and singing after the match as opposed to having to wait till Houston cleared out and then, you know, folks getting back on the bus and going home.
Yeah, so I think we were talking about this off air, and one thing that you said that you had heard from a few people is that this felt like a 2021 throwback game.
Yeah, I felt like it did, and I got that perspective too. It's like the first half, Austin seemed like the better team. They had the better chances. It was, you know, at least one ball off the woodwork. We had more shots. We had more possession, and then whatever happened in the second half, you know, at halftime, like Austin really came out flat and was on the back foot, and this is where some of these Josh Wolff criticisms like come back, because that was a big thing in 2021 that people said all the time, right? It's like Austin would be better in the first half, and then teams would go in the locker room. One club would make adjustments, one club wouldn't, and then Austin would like lose the second half, especially early in the second half. Those were the results. Both Houston goals came in the second half. I don't know if I'm ready to say that it's because like Josh Wolff failed to make adjustments, that was the reason for it.
Yeah, I think there's like a few big things playing into this performance. I think some of it had to do with personnel. I think some of it had to do with just like maybe be like some players being a little tired, a little flat after a couple of pretty long, both physically and emotionally draining weeks. And then, yeah, I think not adapting to those two things and just saying go out and do the same thing, knowing that maybe they're going to be a little bit emotionally drained, a little bit physically drained, and then having other guys on the field who maybe can't do the same things as the guys who are normally on the field, and Wolff just expecting them to do the exact same thing that these other guys do, and it clearly didn't work.
Yeah, and I think one other factor is like for the first time in these games, it seems like Houston looked pretty good too. Like Houston had a good game, and they're actually maybe more threatening than I think people thought they were gonna be. Like watching Karaskia and Ache had a really good game, and just like there may be a little something there that I don't know that we expected to see going into the season.
Yeah, one thing going into this game, I watched back some of their first two games, so this is just their third game total. And Kevin Morris actually posted a Twitter thread about how Cincinnati and I can't remember who else they played at the moment, but the other two teams that they played, pressing them and then like forcing them to play long balls in moments that they didn't want to. And that's kind of how Austin plays in their press. Like it's about forcing them into certain parts of the field and playing certain balls maybe a little earlier than they would have wanted to. And it kind of worked for a little bit. And then after a bit, when you're not putting that pressure on, the first wave of the press can go. But if the second wave isn't there, or isn't marking tight enough, or doesn't come soon enough, like the press just falls apart. And it happened a lot. And I think this is a thing that's happened to Austin at various times across their existence, is if you're going to press, you have to press together. It's like you all have to cover for each other in those moments. And if the second line is slow, then you essentially just wasted it and are putting yourself in a really hard, like really tough position. And it just kept happening over and over where they'd break that first line. There'd be no pressure on the ball on the second line. And then Hector Herrera is just spraying passes all over the field. And we're putting us in tough spots where if you're putting pressure on those moments, you're making them play that ball sooner than they want to, then it gives us the advantage, because all you have to do is watch the ball out, win the header, and then you're breaking the other way. And that not what was happening.
Yes, let's, before we get into like specifics on players, let's maybe go through sort of the lineup and a few of the key stats. So the lineup for Violette was, I think, the same as the one from Saturday, the week before. So we saw two changes to the lineup for Houston, both of which I feel like people were calling for. One is Diego Fagundes returning to the starting lineup on the left wing, and one was Maxi Urruti sliding in for Giassi Zardes at forward. And I don't think either of these guys necessarily covered themselves in glory.
Yeah.
During this match, I think it's maybe an understatement in terms of how they played, and I imagine we will get into that a lot. But like, I guess Do you want to go to the goals? You want to talk about
well,
players?
let's talk about the other sub too, because
Okay.
Johan Valencia starts for Owen Wolff.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one
And
too. Yep.
I'm guessing this is just kind of minute management. One thing with younger players, this is a thing that teams run into is they'll come on strong at the beginning of the year, and their bodies aren't used to going that hard for that long. Maybe some like mental aspects of it are tougher on them. And so it is like a commonly accepted practice when you have a younger guy who you're actually pushing pretty hard. It is common practice to rest those guys pretty regularly, just so that they can adapt throughout the season and you don't wear them down throughout the season as well. And so I think that's probably what that one was for. Also, he's about to leave for national team camp. You don't want him to push himself super hard in this one, then fly however many 10 hours in a plane and then get off and push himself for 2 matches there and get hurt or something like that. So I think that was just managing his legs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we talked about this. No goals in the first half, 2 goals in the second half. The first one on a penalty, which wasn't originally called. I think it was on, was it Lundqvist? The handball in the box. And that was super.
Just unfortunate.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, but it was obvious, but it was unfortunate.
Yeah, it's like across into the box. I think it clips a Houston player's head. And so it like deflects. And Lundqvist is just, and the worst part is like that ball was just going to go by. It wasn't going to get to another Houston player. It was probably going to go out of bounds. It wasn't going to be on target. But because of where Lundqvist is standing, like in the 6-yard box, essentially, and it hits his hand, like you have to give the pin. And it's just really unlucky, really unfortunate. I don't think you can blame Lundqvist for it. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And yeah, it was unfortunate positioning there. And the second one, was Hector Herrera picking up a goal with an assist from Griffin Dorsey pretty late. I feel like Austin was super threatening in the second half, so it's not at all very surprised to see this goal.
Yeah, and this one again was Emiliano Rigoni, who worked really hard throughout the game, and in this moment found himself at the top of the box next to Hector Herrera. And as that ball goes wide, Rigoni just kind of stops and doesn't track Herrera into the box. And I think he thinks that Ring is close enough to him that he can just pass him on. And the ball gets there before he does. And Herrera does a really good job of opening up his hips and kind of sneaking that ball past Ring. And so in that moment, Rigoni should have tracked Herrera through the box there, but I think it was late and maybe he didn't. It's just one of those things when you hear like soccer coaches talk about suffering. They use that word a lot, suffering. That's the moment when you have to suffer. It's like, okay, I'm tired. It's the end of the game. I think Alex can get him. No, you have to go. You have to follow him.
Yeah. Yeah, it ends 2-0. There was a fair amount of extra time. Didn't amount to a lot. Austin wasn't super threatening the second half, which we've talked about. So let's now let's go back maybe into the lineup changes and what we saw from each of these players. At least 2 of which we've seen a lot of demand for, like seeing more action, more playing time for the fans over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think with these changes and kind of with what happened during the game, I think something that's going to be interesting to watch in the coming weeks is, I guess, player-coach relations is going to be what we can call it. I think one of the simpler ones is with the strikers. So Jossie, maybe this was like minutes rotation. Jossie's been playing a lot, and so you give Maxi the run out. But like Wolff has said this in interviews, like if guys aren't scoring, you have to give the other guy a shot. There's like, he wants to breed that competition. And so Jossie hasn't scored yet. Okay, give Maxi a run out. I think that's fine. The competition is good. And I think it's good for the coach to breed that competition. And so Maxi, I thought it was fine. But again, there's like big stretches of the game where he's not affecting it at all. And I think there's like, maybe he's like a bit more exciting, or people feel more confident in him when he has the ball in front of goal. But as far as the rest of the game, I thought he like tried at times to affect it in the way that Jossie can, as far as dropping in and playing the ball with each other. But I don't think Maxi affected the game the way that Jossie has been pretty consistently, taking like being in front of goal out of it, just like build up combination in the middle, getting into good spots. and just like actually affecting the game throughout and not just when you're in front of goal, which turns out Maxi didn't do that in this game either.
Right. Well, he did hit the post once, so this led to a lot of debate over the relative value of hitting the post versus other types of not having shots on goal, which I don't think we necessarily need to get into, but I thought was an interesting part of the discussion. And let's talk about the midfield. Like, are you worried about Johan Valencia? Like, he hasn't looked great at all, and I don't think he added a lot to this game. And I think he made some decent moves in just like strictly in defense, but like he did nothing with the ball. Like,
yeah,
he cut off some drives, like that was perfectly fine, but I mean, he's very much a one-way player at this point, I think.
Yeah, I thought like in duels and winning balls, I thought he's actually pretty good. Like he won quite a few balls and would just like dish it off to someone else. But the difference in him and Owen is like very noticeable. Valencia pretty much only ever passes sideways or just like dishes it off to the nearest person. He never really carried the ball forward and like beat a guy or like caused any chaos in the defense by carrying it a little bit deeper. And then just made some really odd positional choices at times. Like I feel like Owen and Danny do a good job of keeping a healthy distance and providing options in between lines and like kind of pulling defenders away from each other. And so often Valencia was like, Danny would drop into the back line, which is a thing that they've done in the buildup. And then Owen in those moments will often like find space in between those lines and be an option, or at least make the defenders think about him. And Valencia almost looked like he was like marking one of their forwards. I was like, no, we have the ball. You don't have to do that. Right
Yeah.
And so just like made some weird decisions. And so like, although he didn't like make any huge mistakes, didn't like defended quite well, but just as far as like when we had the ball, he was just like a neutral. He would receive the ball, make a short pass, and then not really affect the game in any other way outside of that.
Yeah. So I think this is probably not controversial, but Danny had his worst match of the year too, I believe, against Houston. Do you think was some of that not being covered with Valencia, or did he just have an off night overall and it was a kind of a fluke?
Yeah, I think it's more of I felt it. I mean, some may disagree with me. I think it was kind of a system thing. Like I don't think the rest of it was happening around him to allow him to kind of have his best game. And then also with Valencia, it really did feel like they were crowding each other sometimes, and it just like the vibe was off there. And so I don't really have any like big specific notes for Danny. I just think like the chemistry was off.
Okay, so you mentioned the system, which is going to lead me into like the thing that we wanted to talk about, and that is this common belief, which I'm kind of on board with, that like Austin had a system that worked, that led to a lot of goals last year, and it seems like it's gotten changed up a little bit, maybe just for the sake of change, and then it's not panning out, and that maybe Austin's just like revert to what worked in 2022, and like Josh Wolff should stop tinkering with things. So I think you probably have a different opinion on this than has been expressed so far.
Yeah, as far as like, I disagree with it in that I don't think Wolff should just keep doing the same thing because it worked last year. Because the truth is, it kind of stopped working last year. We like our record at the end of the season was not very good. We kind of limped into the playoffs with not a great record in the last little stretch. People had kind of like figured us out to an extent. We weren't scoring as much. And then another thing that I think that this change does, there was a lot of times last year where if we weren't just passing super cleanly and like Danny Pereira weren't on top of his game, we had a hard time even playing through a press sometimes. And I know this year it's a small sample size, but I think this new attacking shape helps that. And we really haven't had that much trouble getting through a team's press so far. It's what happens after that we're having trouble with. It's like getting into those chances and finishing off chances, but we really haven't had a team give us a ton of trouble playing it out of the back yet. And so I think there are reasons why these changes have been made. I think the question is like, do you trust Josh Wolff to figure it out? Because we essentially spent all of 2021 figuring it out. Granted, lots of injuries, a thin roster to begin with. So there are other issues, but from 2021 to 2022, I think he figured it out. I think there are good reasons for changing things. And so I think the question at this point is, do you trust Josh Wolff? Do we think he's going to figure it out? Because it's not quite clicking the way it is now, but I think there's some promise there. I think there's some adaptations either based on personnel or game state that you can tweak within this to make it start working. But I'm against the idea that we should just scratch it all and go back to the exact same thing we were doing last year, because I think people figured out what we were doing last year.
Well, I think it's the biggest. You've hit on the biggest debate in the fan base. It's like, can Josh Wolff figure it out, or is he like not capable of making those adjustments? I would like to offer the opinion of the false nine, which is that
not that we should play a false nine, but that like
the opinion of the false nine Texas, yes, which is that all time when Josh Wolff is wearing black, we have a 25% win percentage. Whereas when he's in Verde, Austin's 16 wins and 11 losses, and in Seafoam, Austin is 7 wins and 2 losses. So what we need to do is get Josh Wolff back in some shade of green, and things will all be better.
Let's get those stats over to is Corey Jez? Is that the data analyst name for the club?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly.
Let's send it to him.
That's who needs to know. That's who needs to know. Look. All it takes is not in the like 4-layer jackets he had the other night, but like let's get him into some Verde, and things will all be better. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's gonna be okay. So I think before we talk about the Diego thing, ultimately, like there's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety in the fan base, especially over this week. And I feel like if things in Violette had not turned out the way they turned out, like maybe this wouldn't be that dramatic. But at this point, Austin's still 2 wins, 2 losses, sitting 6th in the West, not that far off second. Like, I don't think there's any reason to panic, which kind of goes back to your point on the system and whether it's time to scrap it and go back to 2022.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, this is MLS. We don't need to be good right now. I think we paid a price in CCL because of like doing something new. And when you put all these guys who haven't really been doing it for very long together on a field in that away leg in Violette, we got punished for that. And so that's part of the price you can pay. But as far as like the league competition goes, making the playoffs and going deep into the playoffs, this part of the season really doesn't matter. Ask the Seattle Sounders for the last 10 years. Like for several seasons, they've been like mediocre for 3/4 of the season, turn it on at the end, make the playoffs, and then go on a run and make it to the final. And so I'm not saying we're the Sounders. The Sounders earned that and kind of built up the infrastructure and the rosters to be able to do that kind of thing. But if we can like maybe suffer through this part of it, Wolff can figure it out, find the things that work, find the players that work, get the players that aren't working within these systems to improve certain things. By the time we do get to that part of the season where it does matter, maybe these things will be ticking, and in a way that is better than what we were doing at the end of the year last year.
Which actually wouldn't be that hard for things to be ticking better in the way that they were at the end of last year.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into wingers. Let's get into Emiliano Rigoni and Diego Fagundes and their respective sort of performances over the last couple of weeks, and maybe I'd say over the season to date. I think, and like maybe what people think about him. So Rigoni, I don't know. What did you think about what you saw to him? Like he created good chances. I think it seems like he's in the overthinking things phase of his play. Like he can get there and he just like he's like always takes a touch. He hesitates a little bit too long. He takes like an extra touch he doesn't need, but like he's getting in good positions and it's just like not working out for him.
Yeah. The biggest anomaly in MLS right now is like, I watched the game back and I think in the CCL match, those are the games where like I am not going to defend Rigoni and Zardes because I didn't think they were all that great in those games. But in this one, I watched it back again, kind of thinking like, okay, I'm going to watch Rigoni and like be pretty critical of him. And again, I thought he played pretty well until like those few key moments where he didn't. And it's so frustrating. It's just like, it really does feel like if he gets the one that like it's a confidence thing almost, and it's just going to be coming. But it's really frustrating to see him like do so many things right, and then in the moment where it matters most to like maybe not quite make the right decision, or like not play the right ball or whatever, like taking that extra touch on that transition play instead of shooting it first time, or like whenever he finds that ball in the half space just outside the box and turns in and shoots it with his left foot, like, okay, maybe it's a little too far out to be shooting near post right there. Like just these little decisions that like in a normal game for a guy who had scored a goal, we're probably not that critical about those things, but because it's him and because he's had so many of these moments that haven't panned out, like the pressure just adds on every time it happens.
Yeah, and that's one where if you just look at the box scores, like that becomes even more evident, right? Like you're looking at a guy that's played, I don't know how many minutes, a bunch of games and a bunch of minutes over most of a season now, over parts of 2 seasons, but almost, most of a season total, and like the results just haven't been there. And he's a super high profile player, so I can see the frustration. Whereas like Ethan Finley has no goal contributions to date too, but I don't think anybody's expecting a ton out of him either. It's like those expectations are just different. So I think it leaves us now with like the Diego Fagundes experiment. So we've seen Diego play a little bit less over the last couple matches. He starts this one and he did not have a great performance. So like, why don't you like break down what you saw out of him, and then we can talk about maybe some of the coach stuff after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you normally see out of Diego Fagundes is a lot of energy, he's like a little bee buzzing around, always finding the ball, always dribbling past guys, making nice little give and go 1-2 passes, things like that. And it just seemed like the energy wasn't quite there. And then that crispness wasn't there either, where generally like he doesn't take heavy touches and lose the ball all that often. He did it a few times in this one. He doesn't really make bad passes, and he did it a few times in this one. He generally like puts in the effort and runs back to get balls and do like kind of that dirty work stuff. And he didn't really do that in this one. And so it was like, he's not messy. Like he's not technically gifted enough to not put in the work. Like why Diego Fagundes is so good is because he does have this high technical ability, but also works super hard. And like those two things combined make him so special. And when one of them's off and he's not doing the other one, like he's a subpar player. And Josh Wolff said like after the game in the press conference, somewhat unprompted, this was not a direct question really, but he said that was a poor performance. I think if you have a poor performance, it's fair to come out of the game, and like said it outright. Like I thought he was bad and I needed to pull him off.
Yeah. And so I wasn't watching on TV. I didn't notice it on the field. So there was a little bit of a moment between the two, right when he was coming off.
The camera caught Fagundes giving like this is what it looked like to me. It was like sarcastic applause to Wolff as he ran off the field, saying like, "Oh yeah, brilliant idea. Like I'm the best player. You can't take me out," kind of thing. And then the Keith and Mo on the broadcast were saying like there's some like afters on the sideline, and maybe Davey Arnaud went and talked to him, but I'd be very curious to know like how that all ended, if like it calmed down or if Diego kept being mad once he got over there. Fagundes told Phil West in the press area after the game, he said, this is a quote from Fagundes. He said he thinks the performances have to be better, so they have to be better. Was I happy to come out tonight? No. But if he's saying I have to be better, then I have to step it up. And I think Phil said that there was like a little bit of attitude behind that.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Like,
because if you just read those words, you're like, yeah, I mean, this is something somebody should say. And I think even this ex-player, was it Sasha Klesson or somebody that just read that quote? It was one of the ex-players who's a broadcaster. And I just read that quote. It's like, well, yeah, he's just like owning not being great and needing to play better. But what we got from Phil was that was maybe not necessarily the tone that was behind the quote.
Yeah. So when I was talking about kind of like the player relations part, like these are the things where like Josh Wolff needs to be a motivator, and like as a coach, like managing people, you have to push buttons and pull levers, and it's a difficult balancing game because like, yeah, if a player's not playing well, one way to motivate him is to pull him out and not give him time, not start him in certain games. If a striker's not scoring, start the other striker until the other guy earns a spot back. And so it like the best case scenario is like it works and these guys are motivated. They understand they have to work harder. But it could also go the other way where these guys get pissed off and he loses them.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between the two seasons. Like in 2022, he was able to do that in a way that didn't ruffle the feathers. Whereas in 2021, we saw a little bit of like specifically calling guys out after matches and it not going over well. So like hopefully this is a coach who's still relatively young and being a head coach and he's learned from it and will be able to build on that. And we won't know, right? Because like all this stuff you're talking about, all this man management stuff comes when they're at the training facility, when we don't really have access to them, when nobody really knows what's going on. And either like he's going to build those bridges and Austin's going to have bigger and better things, or like that relationship is like breaking down. And we don't really know until we see what happens on the field the next week or the next month.
Yeah. Or until we hear like maybe whispers
until
8 months from now after it's over or whatever.
After it's over, right. But we're all going to pretend. We're all going to pretend on Twitter that we know exactly what's going on all the time.
By those whispers from like the year and a half dated whispers that I've heard, and just like people within the league, the players do like playing for Wolff. They do, for the most part, respect him and his staff, and that they've built a pretty good culture. So hopefully this little tiff, hopefully that's all it was, and Diego got caught in the moment and was angry, and they've sorted it out. Hopefully that culture is strong enough to withstand that, but there's always the possibility that it doesn't. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks.
Was there anything else you want to talk about for Houston before we get a little bit into Colorado?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think this maybe kind of goes into the Colorado game, but I think one of the reasons why this game didn't work as well, it's like I don't think it was necessarily like the attacking structure that wasn't working. It was how certain players were playing in the structure. Which that's a coach's job as well, right? I'm not excusing Wolff here, but in the very first game against St. Louis, we talked about how as we have that back line of three and the two holding midfielders and then those front five, and those two groups were getting separated too often. As we play it up the side wide, the holding midfielders weren't pushing up fast enough to offer that outlet. And then as we saw Jossie Zardes do in the second game, he started dropping in and kind of being an option there to play off of. And Maxi Urruti was not doing that in those moments. And Danny Pereira and Johan Valencia were not getting into position to offer those outlets to the inside either. And so a few times we pushed it up the side and there'd just be no real options going forward. And so it's like a thing that we know, like they've already solved this problem once and then forgot how to do it again. And so I think part of it is legs. And again, I think this is like the personnel kind of thing. Like if we don't have the guys to do the same thing that Owen Wolff does, or if Danny Pereira is too tired or whatever to do the same thing he did last week in this game, we either need to like light a fire into those guys, or if they just can't do it, we need to change something. And I think those are the things that like, I don't think it's like erase it all and start over. I think it's little tweaks, little adjustments that we can learn. And if Johan Valencia can do that, great. If he can't, then find someone else who can. And so I still don't think it's entirely broken, but it was disjointed for sure. And it reminded me a lot of that first game against St. Louis.
Yeah, well, the good thing on that is like, so there's a week off between Houston and Colorado. There's 2 weeks before the next match. So any leggy kind of things will have themselves sorted out, hopefully in short order. And I think, what are we, 3 weeks post Julio Cascante injury? So we're getting, by the time, not for this match, but by the time Austin plays again, you're getting a little bit back into the window of where at least Julio's being reevaluated, which I think fixes a lot of things in terms of team depth, because you don't have Alex Ring playing center back, which makes both the central defense and the midfield deeper.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Colorado. I'm just going to like curse this preview from the start and say current leaders of the Wooden Spoon. 1 goal for, 7 goals against. See, 3 losses and a draw so far this season. So -6 goal differential. Best player just went out in a season-ending Achilles injury. they haven't put it together. Like, this seems like the kind of match Austin should win, especially at home.
Yeah. So as far as personnel goes, they brought in another center back. I think Colorado gave up the second most goals in the West last year. So they brought in a center back named Maxo to kind of shore up that back line. Hasn't quite worked so far. I don't know that it's his fault, but he hasn't been enough to raise that level, really. They've given up 7 goals in 4 games. To be fair, 4 of those were in the first game against Seattle. So it's a little bit tilted, like a little bit slanted there, but Colorado is kind of known as being the island of misfit toys in MLS. They'll take partially, I think mostly because their owners are too cheap to actually spend big money and bring guys in. And so they'll take MLS guys who are broken at other teams on a discount. This year's addition to that category is Kevin Cabral, who is at the Galaxy. Was a multi-million dollar DP player. They got him in for $1 million GAM. And then I think if they re-sign him and whatever else, they'll pay him more money next year. But he really hasn't hit the mark yet, which coming into a new team, fair enough. But he hasn't quite really affected games that much this year. As you said before, Jack Price goes down with that Achilles injury, out for the season. It's not lucky for them, but luckily enough, he was out for most of last year as well. So they're kind of used to playing without him, but they're also not very good last year. So they did bring in Connor Ronan, an Irish player, I believe, that was playing in Europe. They brought him in this year, and he's been kind of playing in that deepest lying midfielder role with Price out. And then Brian Acosta, a player that was at Dallas for a few years, has come in. And I think those two guys are going to have to kind of pick up that slack. As far as what they look like, they've played like a 4-3-3 at times. And I think against San Jose, they played a back 5, which I think is what we saw from them last year. I'm kind of hoping they'll do that against us coming on the road, maybe setting up a little bit more defensively. I think as far as like what Austin has done well against with that box midfield, like the 4 interior guys, whenever Colorado sets up in that back 5, they really only have 3 players kind of playing in the middle of the park there. I think that gives us the opportunity to get Danny Pereira driving through that midfield, get Sebastian Driussi on the ball more. And so I kind of hope that's what we see, but I'm not sure what we will. As far as Austin goes, though, we talked about earlier, Väisänen's gone on international duty. Owen Wolff has gone on international duty. How are we going to line up against this team?
This is a very, very good question. I mean, you almost have to have, so what is that? Alex Ring obviously is going to be one of the center backs.
Yeah, let's start at the top and go backwards.
Okay.
So at striker, I want to see Jossie back in.
I want to see Jossie Zardes. I would agree with that too.
How much in the doghouse is Diego Fagundes right now? Do we see Finley start?
I think we see Finley start. I think we see him start. I think it just seems like a very Josh Wolff thing to be like, bring Diego in off the bench in the second half and see like how hungry he is, but don't start him after the way he played last week. I'll be surprised if he starts.
I guess the other question is how much in the doghouse is Emiliano Rigoni right now? Because who's in the doghouse most?
Who's in the doghouse most?
Start the other 2 guys, because I could see a situation where they start Fagundes and Finley as well.
Well, so I can only go with Josh Wolff's quotes. He did say that Emmy needed to step up when he was talking about the different players that need to play more. But he also said he's our most consistent guy in getting great spots. He's not broken that seal, but his performance is good and his output is quite good. So I feel like Josh Wolff is really, and maybe this is the man management. Maybe this is like the Ted Lasso, like I'm going to believe in this guy and it's going to like lead him to be good. But I feel like Wolff is very up on Emiliano Rigoni and what he can bring to the club. So I would expect to see him to start.
That it feels like he's still using the kid gloves on Rigoni, like
for sure.
Like, I don't need to be mean to you because you're probably being mean enough to yourself. But whereas Diego, like, I'm going to go after him. Again, it seems hard to manage a soccer team. But then, up in the air with those wingers, but it's going to be a combination of 2 of those 3 guys probably, right? Dropping in, Driussi is going to be one of the other attacking midfielders. Deeper lying midfielders, like almost certainly Danny Pereira. I would want to see Sofyan Jeffal start next to him. I think as far as skill set goes, like he's the most obvious person to slot in there, but he hasn't been playing. I think the only real minutes he's gotten was in that terrible away leg at Violette. And so I don't know if it's like Wolff isn't happy with the way he's slotting into the system, if there's something else going on, but Wolff clearly doesn't see him the same way that I do. And so do we think that he'll go from not making match day squads sometimes to starting in this game, or will he give Valencia another run out?
Well, I guess that's another thing we've talked about, we've seen, is just the getting up to speed. Like how much Josh Wolff seems to value a lot, like people understanding the system. And I think objectively, from what we've seen from Jeffal, he deserves more time. But I don't know that he'll go there. So I can see it being the same midfield pairing that we had against Houston. And if I was going to predict it, I would say like, yeah, it's probably going to be Valencia and Pereira, which worked for 70 minutes on the road.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are you going to see Jeffal? Are you going with Jeffal?
I honestly wouldn't be shocked. Mostly just because like we saw Valencia play and I can't imagine Wolff was like super happy with it. Again, he didn't make any huge mistakes, but he didn't really improve Austin's play. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Jeffal get the run out. Just like, this is an opportunity. You have to throw someone in. So why not him? Going into the back line, I think this is where it gets wild.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I got out pen and paper and was writing down the different combos, but let me tell you what I came up with.
Okay.
And which it's not that wild because it's the back line that we saw in the away leg at Violette. So Adam Lundqvist at left back, Alex Ring and Nick Lima as the center backs, John Gallagher at right back. Of course, Gallagher then pushing up and becoming the right winger and leaving a back three of Lundqvist, Ring, and Lima.
I can't debate that just because that's all we have left. But I guess why do you think we would see Lundqvist versus Kolmanic?
I just think he's a bit more defensively solid player. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Kolmanic, because like honestly, I think Kolmanic has held his own defensively. He's been set up because he's not pushing up so high. I think like where he would get caught out was in speed moments, like recovery speed. He didn't really have it. And then later in games when he was having to do so much running, he would get tired and would get beat for speed even worse. In this setup, he's not having to do all that up and down running. And so he's actually done quite well in one-on-one moments. So maybe it is Kolmanic, but just to have like more defensively minded players when you're not playing any real center backs, that's why I would like lean Lundqvist, but like I don't feel that strongly about it. I wouldn't be surprised or upset if it were Kolmanic.
Well, let me ask you a little bit just about specific matchups. So Colorado scored 1 goal this year. From who was it? Is it Cole Bassett who picked up He's their top scorer with 1 and their only scorer with 1. Like, why not pick an offensive lineup and just go more on the front foot and not worry as much about? I mean, in my head, like, let's pick our best attacking formation and trust that will overcome the fact that Austin's super thin defensively against a club like Colorado. Yeah, you can't do that against LAFC or somebody or Seattle, right? But like Colorado, I feel like you could take that gamble.
I guess the way I'm thinking of it is like no matter what, it's going to be attacking lineup. And so like maybe on these margins you play your slightly better defender in this position. But yeah, I think that has to be the plan. Like we have to play on the front foot. We have to keep the ball. We have to score because Colorado, although they haven't scored, they're playing a lot of young guys who haven't played with this team very much. They're still kind of learning each other, but we've seen the wingers they have last year. So like Michael Barrios is a guy who can get out in transition and burn you down the wing.
And he's burned Austin, right? I mean, it's like, I've seen it very specifically.
Darren Yappy, the young striker that they've been starting in these games, he's also he's a big guy, but he's a good athlete and can run whenever, like, his top speed is pretty good, and he likes to sit on those backs, like the back shoulder of those strikers, and get out and run. And I think in their last game, or maybe one of their games, they're looking for it. So as soon as they turn it over, they're looking for Yappy to get on that back shoulder and play him through. And so they are going to be looking to break in transition on those moments. So again, like, those are kind of the times when, like, Alex Ring has shined, right? Like, he's probably better in those moments than Julio Cascante would have been. So I don't think we've been hurt in those moments so much this year. And so maybe this lineup works out well for Austin, and we just, like, keep the ball, keep the intensity up, and put pressure on them, and keep turning the screws. And hopefully we can get an early goal or two, and it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, I think this is one where being at home really helps Austin. Being in front of the crowd, being comfortable, not playing at altitude, given what's going on. So this is where you have to expect a result, I guess. It's just where I'm going to leave that.
And I think there's been people saying, like, okay, we need to start Kip Keller, we need to start Emre Tarek because they're the only center backs, right? But I don't know if anybody's noticed, but they have not made match day rosters since their big mistakes.
Right? Yeah.
And so Kip Keller makes his big mistake. He hasn't been on a match day roster since then. Emre Tarek has his big bad game in the Dominican Republic, has not been in a match day roster. Even for the return CCL leg, where we had, I think, 23 players on the bench. Normally we just have 20. So an extended bench. We had a third goalkeeper on there before either of those center backs. And so I might have thought that, okay, maybe Wolff gives one of these guys another chance. But the fact that they're not making 23-man rosters when we don't have center backs, I think they're not really in the picture right now.
Yeah, I think I don't know what Tarek's path to success in being back is, but I feel like Kip Keller is let's get in a couple ATX FC2 matches that, like, aren't a disaster and build a little bit of confidence back up. And I could see him parlaying that back into, like, being a part of the team or being one of the guys on the bench on the team again out of there. But I don't think Josh Wolff is going to do anything until he feels like Kip's confidence is built back up, because he's still young. He still has a lot of potential. And, like, you don't want to risk that for a match against Colorado.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else on this one?
No, I think let's just go ahead and wrap it up.
All right. Well, before we finish, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Come find us online at LViajero87 and JBentley_ATX on Twitter. And then we're at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We'd like to encourage you to sign up for the Striker, where you can get a 30% discount with the code MoonTower23 with a capital M. Jeremiah, what can folks look out for there?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about some of the interview that Phil gave, but it was a really good in-depth article this week from Phil West about the match, about the relatively quiet start, about the trouble of the wing. So I would encourage people to check that out. I think Patreon stuff, like, we've got some cool stuff coming up, and we're, like, we say this every week, but I think we're really close to getting cool stuff out. And then also wanted to, when you reminded people to rate, review, and subscribe, that if you review, like, we will give money to a good cause too. So this is all the more reason to review the show this week as opposed to every other week.
Absolutely. All right. We'll be back next week with another episode of Moon Tower Soccer. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, see you never.
La gente
Oh my God.